Hello, this is a brief introduction of the Cardinal Store Locator plugin for WordPress. I have a test WordPress install set up, and I'm going to go through some of the back-end settings that you'll find after installing the Cardinal Locator plugin. So I'm going to go ahead and start by clicking on the plugins page. And if you need help installing the plugin, please visit cardinalwp.com for thorough documentation on how to do that. I'm going to begin by clicking the Activate link and activate the plugin just like any other WordPress plugin. And there are two methods for getting to the plugin settings page. You can click on this link here, or you can go to Settings in the left menu and Cardinal Locator. And this initial tab you'll come to after clicking that link will be the License Settings tab. If you find your license key in the purchase receipt email, you can go ahead and enter it into this field and click the Activate button, and you won't see this License Settings tab by default again. The other tabs you'll find here are Primary Settings, Style Settings, Structure Settings, Filter Settings, Language Settings, and the Support tab, and they're grouped by common functionality. And the important thing to note before getting into these tabs is that you actually don't need to set any of these settings for the plugin to work by default. The locations custom post type is registered, and if you're planning on adding locations one by one or using a custom or third-party script to do an import, you can simply start adding or editing locations with this locations link in the left menu. So if I go back to the settings page, start by going through some of the primary settings, and the important one to focus on initially is the data source. If you're not going to use the default custom post type that's registered with the plugin, it's important to set that first. You can select from the default custom post type, another custom post type that you might have registered, a local or remote file, and the file types for local or remote can be KML, XML, or JSON. And the other primary settings that you'll find here are common to what you might expect with a Store Locator plugin. So you've got length type between miles and kilometers, the zoom level of the actual map itself on the page, map type, you can switch between road map, satellite, hybrid terrain, store limit, the number of locations that are displayed at one time, distance alert, so this will show an alert if the locations are not within a certain radius of the user's location. And a lot of the rest of these are pretty self-explanatory. If I click into origin marker specifically, I would like to show an example of adding an image. Some of the fields add this upload image field, and it just uses the default WordPress media uploader. So you can go ahead and find the files that you're looking for and upload them. And each of the image settings also have a dimensions field where you can set the width and height. So if you're wanting to target or have an image look good on a Retina or HDPI screen, you could save the image at 64 by 64 and put the dimensions that it actually shows up at. Right here, 32 by 32 is the fallback. Style settings are just some of the common style settings that can be overridden. So we've got the list background colors of the location list. If you're wanting to add custom map styling, you can do that here. You can set this to true and then upload a file with the array to your WP content or WP content themes or wherever you want to put it. Just set the path of that file here. You can add custom map markers, and you can also set the location category marker images to true. And what that does is allow you to add custom markers for categories under the location category taxonomy that's registered by default. The vast majority of the other styling can be overridden via CSS. Go to the structure settings. The structure settings contain overrides for the default HTML structure in terms of IDs and classes, and it also has settings for things like a region dropdown, maximum distance dropdown, a loading icon, adding a name search. So it's kind of more of the structure settings of the HTML that's output with the shortcode. If I go into the filter settings, in order to show the filtering capabilities of the plugin, I'm going to go ahead and set up an example. I will first show that I have a sample page set up with the plugin shortcode right here. Go back to the settings. In order to add a filter group, you're going to want to head and go and click this Add Filter button. And the default values will be city, state, postal, and the location categories taxonomy. And this will also pick up any custom taxonomies that you add to the default custom post type if you're using that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a city filter, and I'm going to use the select field type. You can also select checkboxes or radio button filters. And I'm going to add one more filter for a state, and I'm going to also use the select field for that as well. Go ahead and save changes. Go back to that page. I'm going to go ahead and view that. And here you'll see I have a city and a state filter. So if I go and add an example zip code, go down, and then I can select any city. And this is live filtering, so it's not doing additional AJAX requests, and it's pretty quick. Show an example of state. I'm going to go back to the plugin settings. And one thing to note with the filtering settings is that by default, the filters are inclusive. So if I go back here and were to select a state and city, both of those filter values would be applied. If you wanted those to work independently, you would want to go to this exclusive filtering setting and set it to true. So you could select a state, and that wouldn't affect the city. Now I'm just going to go ahead and go into the language settings tab. And here you'll find settings for changing the language that's displayed within the Store Locator plugin. So you've got your initial address form input label, the name search label if you're using that, maximum distance label, the region label, and the submit button. And then there are some additional language settings, and all this should be pretty self-explanatory on what each does. Go into the support tab, and this is just kind of a overview of how to get support for the plugin. If you're submitting a support ticket, it's very helpful if you can copy this information in the text area here. All you have to do is click once, and if you could copy that into a private gist, that would be extremely helpful. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go through the meta fields that are added to the default custom post type that's registered with the plugin. So I went ahead and clicked on the locations in the left menu. And if you scroll down here, you will find all the meta fields that you'd expect to find when adding a location post. So you've got the initial featured locations checkbox and all of the address fields. Address, city, state, postal, etc. And if you go ahead and look at the right side of the screen here, you'll see the location categories taxonomy, which is registered by default with the plugin. And I've just added a couple of sample categories. The last thing to note is that if you are using a custom post type other than the default custom post type that's registered with the plugin, an additional tab will display here that will allow you to map your meta fields so that the plugin can interpret those correctly. And that is about all I was going to cover in this introduction video. If you have any questions, please visit the Cardinal WP website and use the support form, or you can go down to the footer of the site and click the contact link, which will bring you to a basic contact form. Thanks.